The rain had been speaking to the windows all afternoon, a steady, insistent shush against the glass that Evelyn had ceased to consciously register years ago. It was simply part of her small cottage now. The gables, much like the slight, melodic groan of the floorboards in the hallway, or the amplified tick-tock of the grandfather clock whenever the evening shadows began to settle. The world outside her small, isolated haven blurred into a canvas of wet, dull gray and shimmering silver. And inside, everything was still. Everything was precisely, even rigidly, ordered the way it often is in the life of a woman well into her 50s after a quiet, decisive divorce. After the long, slow years had taken what they wanted, leaving behind only the calm of routine, Evelyn moved through her kitchen with quiet, practiced motions. The click of the electric kettle, the gentle splash of a tea bag dropped into her favorite ceramic mug, the soft, buttery glow of a single lamp spilling over the faded floral tablecloth, illuminating the steam that rose like ghostly, curling ribbons dot in the living room, a tower of classic, unread novels waited beside her favorite armchair. A half-finished, deep sapphire blue scarf rested in a woven basket on the floor. The television was off. The phone lay face down, silent. On nights exactly like this, Evelyn coveted the silence. Or at least, she told herself that she did. The downpour outside hammered harder for a moment, then softened, settling into a familiar rhythmic percussion. Somewhere in the deep distance, thunder rolled lazily. It wasn't a sound of anger, but of a lingering reminder. I am here, and you are alone. She took her cup and walked to the front window. The old Harbor District street was nearly deserted, the streetlights casting blurred, imperfect halos in the oppressive moisture. Wet pavements glistened. Neighbors' cars sat dark and quiet in their driveways. There was a strange, deep comfort in this sameness. In this predictability, Evelyn had cultivated a life defined by the rhythm of evenings alone. She'd grade papers for the community, textile, and art classes she taught, flip through a book of coastal sketches, make herself small, simple meals, and retire early. No one inquired as to her whereabouts. No one waited up for her. Some days she truly believed that this solitude felt like freedom. Other days, it felt like standing in a vast, empty auditorium that never offered an echo when you spoke. She was halfway through her first sip of tea, leaning against the cool glass, when the knock came. Part 2. The disruption. It was a single. Firm sound at first, loud, unexpected. Her hand jerked involuntarily, and a drop of the searing tea splashed onto her wrist. Evelyn blinked at the door, her heart giving a quick, unreasoned thump of pure anxiety. No one came by unannounced. Not anymore. Delivery drivers used a doorbell that buzzed. Neighbors always sent a quick text first. Her own family lived across the country. The knock came again. Louder this time, cutting right through the muffling sound of the rain. She set the mug down carefully, deliberately. She smoothed the front of her cardigan, a nervous, entirely useless gesture, as if the person on the other side would notice or care. Then she crossed the room. The hallway seemed to stretch out before her, longer than usual, amplified by the slight tremor that came from having her hard-won peace so abruptly disturbed. She slid the chain, unlocked the bolt, hesitated for half a breath, then pulled the heavy wooden door inward. A young man stood framed in the porch light, soaked completely through. Water dripped from the brim of his dark, heavy hair, tracing hurried lines down his face and neck, gathering at the soaked collar of his jacket. His large, overstuffed backpack was slung over one shoulder, unzipped just enough for a rolled-up blanket to peek out. His boots were caked with mud. Denim jeans darkened, almost black by the relentless downpour. The harsh porch light carved shadows along his jawline, and his eyes, tired, achingly familiar, lifted slowly to meet hers. "Hello, Evelyn," he said quietly, his voice rough at the edges, saturated with cold. "I'm sorry to just show up like this." For a heartbeat, she could only stare. The rain, the years, the hollow evenings. All of it fell away as a flood of immediate recognition snapped into place. "Caleb," she breathed. "Caleb, is that you?" A small, exhausted smile tugged at his lips. Yeah, it's me. The last time she had seen him, he'd been laughing at his mother's summer barbecue, talking excitedly about a digital design contract he'd landed in the city. Before that, she had known him as the boy who used to fall asleep on her lap during family movie nights. The awkward teenager who'd show up at her old apartment asking for help polishing a college essay. He was the son of her closest friend, Clara, the woman who had been her anchor through the turbulent waters of her divorce from Arthur for 20 years. They had been extended family. Now he stood before her as a man, and there was something hollow, something raw in his face that made her chest squeeze with unexpected pain. "What on earth are you doing out in this weather?" she asked, stepping back before he could answer. Her voice was sharp with immediate reflexive concern. "Come inside. You're going to get hypothermia." He obeyed without protest, his shoulders sagging as he crossed the threshold. Water instantly puddled on the old hardwood. The smell of cold air and heavy wet earth rushed in with him, filling the small entryway. "Sorry about the mess," he muttered, looking down at his muddy boots. "Leave them there," Evelyn said quickly. "I'll get some towels and a dry shirt. I think I still have one of your old ones from the summer you stayed here after you broke your arm." "That was almost 12 years ago," he replied, with a short, humorless laugh. "I doubt it fits." Evelyn found herself smiling, the tension beneath his words unable to stop the faint curve of her mouth. "Fine. Then you'll simply drown in one of mine. Just don't drip on the living room rug." Oh. She moved into the linen closet by muscle memory, her hands reaching for thick spare towels, a wool blanket, anything to wrap around this sudden, unwelcome storm of a person in her hallway. Her mind raced with disjointed questions. What happened? Why here? Why now? When she returned, he was standing awkwardly near the coat rack, his arms folded tightly across his chest as if he were holding himself together by sheer force of will. She tossed him a towel. He caught it with the ease of an athlete. "Dry off," she said softly. "I'll start the fireplace, Evelyn." His voice stopped her as she turned away. She looked back, and in the flickering light from the hallway, she saw it clearly. The same boy who had once cried on her shoulder when his pet canary died was now encased in a grown man's frame. His eyes carried the deep, quiet exhaustion of something he hadn't yet named. "I didn't know where else to go," he admitted, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I hope that's still allowed." Something inside her, a long dormant protective instinct, stirred violently at those simple, pleading words. "Of course it's allowed," she replied, her voice firm. "You are always welcome here. Caleb, always." She meant it more deeply than she had meant anything in years. Part 3. The Confession by Firelight the Gables. Old stone fireplace hadn't been used much since Arthur left, but Evelyn knew exactly which logs burned slowest and how to angle the screen so the smoke didn't billow back into the room. Within minutes, clean, hungry flames were licking at the kindling, casting a flickering amber hue across the living room. The shadows softened. The house, which had felt so empty for so long, seemed to take a deep, long breath in the sudden warmth. Caleb sank onto the couch, the towel draped around his shoulders like a makeshift cloak. He watched the fire grow, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. Evelyn brought him a dry, thick shirt and a pair of oversized sweatpants from the spare room. "They might be a little big," she said, "but at least they're not soaking wet." "Thank you," he murmured, taking them. "Is the bathroom still in the same place?" "Some things are stubborn enough not to change," she replied. She listened to the muffled sound of the door closing and the rustle of fabric as he changed. In the sudden quiet, the house felt suspended between a painful past and an uncertain present. Memories hovered in the corners. A teenage Caleb sprawled on the floor, sketching fantastical digital designs. His mother, Clara, laughing in the kitchen. Evelyn herself clinking glasses with Clara, two women tired but endlessly hopeful. The bathroom door opened. Caleb stepped out, the soft, borrowed cotton hanging loose around his frame. He looked younger, softer, unarmored, better. She asked, a knot in her throat easing. He managed a faint smile. "I forgot how good it feels just to be warm." She gestured toward the couch. Sit, I'll make you something hot to drink before you collapse on my heirloom rug. I wouldn't collapse on your rug, he countered, his voice carrying the first hint of his old familiar teasing. I'd at least aim for the coffee table. Much more dramatic. More dramatic? Yes, she snorted. You've somehow managed to get more dramatic as an adult. Impressive. In the kitchen, she pulled out a tin of premium cocoa powder, whole milk, and the half-empty jar of dark brown sugar she kept reserved for when loved ones visited, which hadn't been often lately. As the milk warmed, she found herself remembering the last time she'd made hot chocolate for him. He'd been 11, sulking after a ridiculous argument with his father. Convinced no one understood the complexities of his preteen angst, she'd added extra cinnamon and a mountain of marshmallows, and he'd pretended not to care until she saw the tension melt from his shoulders. She smiled to herself and brought both steaming mugs to the living room. I'm not sure how you take it these days, she said, setting them down. But the younger version of you insisted on 3 marshmallows and threatened to stage a protest if there were fewer. A flicker of genuine surprise crossed his features. He reached for the mug, his eyes softening. You remember that? I remember you sneaking an extra one when you thought I wasn't paying attention. She replied. A quiet, genuine laugh escaped him. Small victories always. He took a slow sip, closed his eyes for a second, and exhaled deeply. The tension in his shoulders eased by another fraction. They let the silence settle around them. This time it was not empty, nor was it uncomfortable. It was a weighted silence. The fire crackled. The rain tapped gently against the windows, tracing a familiar, comforting pattern. The clock in the hallway ticked its steady rhythm, measuring out each moment as if to reassure them both they were still in the fight. Evelyn set her mug down and leaned forward slightly. All right, she said, her voice gentle but firm. Talk to me. What happened? Caleb stared into the fire, watching the flames dance and change shape. For a moment, she wondered if he would deflect, offer a tired joke, or claim he was fine. Instead, he inhaled deeply, accepting the unspoken invitation to trust. My relationship ended, he said quietly, the words almost sticking in his throat. And then, almost on cue, my entire project at work went sideways. It all just piled up. His fingers tightened around the mug. We both said things we shouldn't have. We both hurt each other more than we meant to. And when it was finally over, I realized I couldn't stand to be in that apartment for another second. So I just left. Packed a bag, got in the car. This was the only place that felt safe enough to stop. Evelyn listened without interrupting. She knew the shape of heartbreak the way it carves through you like water through stone. Slowly, and then all at once. Her divorce had taught her that you could lose someone in stages until one day, the absence felt more solid than their presence ever had. Looking at Caleb now, she recognized that same quiet devastation. The kind that didn't spill out in frantic tears, but sat heavy and immovable behind the eyes. I'm sorry, Caleb, she said softly. That's far too much for one person to carry all at once. He shrugged, but the movement was small, defeated. I keep hearing all the cliches in my head. Suck it up. Move on. Things happen for a reason. But none of that helps when the reason just feels like you weren't enough. Her heart tightened. She remembered people telling her similar things after her marriage ended. All of it meant to comfort. None of it landing where it needed to. You're not just a series of events that happened to you, Caleb, she said. And pain doesn't owe anyone a tidy explanation before it shows up. It's messy. It's unfair. It doesn't care how strong you've managed to be up until this moment. He looked at her, something raw flickering across his face. You always had better metaphors than my last therapist. That's a concerning compliment, she replied dryly. You should probably request a refund. A real brief smile broke through then. I missed you, he admitted. You and Mom. You always made the chaos feel less sharp. Part 4. The Unspoken Agreement. How is Clara? she asked, realizing with a pang of guilt that she hadn't spoken to her friend in several weeks. She hasn't mentioned any of this. She doesn't know the full story yet, he said, staring back at the mesmerizing flames. I told her I needed a break from the city, that I was staying with a colleague for a bit. I was afraid if I went straight to her, I'd just fall apart and never leave. You always said she wanted to wrap me in bubble wrap. She still does, Evelyn said with a faint smile. And you chose the friend who doesn't own bubble wrap. Exactly, he replied quietly. You always let me be a little broken without making me feel like something to fix. The sincerity in his tone slipped under her defenses more easily than any joke could have. She hadn't realized how much she missed being needed in that particular way. Not as a wife, not as a teacher, but as a steady, safe presence in someone's life. You did the right thing coming here, she said. You can stay as long as you need. We'll figure out the rest later. His eyes met hers, gratitude shining through the deep tiredness. Are you sure? He asked. I don't want to be a burden. You seem settled. She let out a small, humorless laugh. That's a poetic way of saying boring. And no, you are not a burden. This house has been far too quiet. It could use a few footprints. They sat like that for a long while. To people who had once been woven into each other's everyday lives, now finding the threads again. They spoke first of small things. Avoiding the core truth. Her art classes. His old friends. The little updates you give people when you're not sure how much of the big, dark truth they can hold yet. Then, slowly, the conversation deepened. He asked if she ever got lonely. She paused, then answered honestly. Sometimes, yes, she said. But I've learned how to be alone without being at war with it. There is a difference. You always seem so strong, he murmured. I got very good at looking like it, she replied. No one really wants to see the days when you can't hold everything together. It makes people uncomfortable. No one ever says that, he muttered. It's always man up or keep it together, as if falling apart is some kind of character flaw. She studied his face, noting the way his jaw tightened when he spoke. Then maybe the Gables can be the house where falling apart is allowed, she said softly. We can take turns if you want. Very democratic. His lips twitched into a genuine smile. You first. Nice try, she shot back gently. You're the one who showed up at my door dripping rainwater and existential dread. He laughed, and in that sound there was an echo of the boy she remembered, mixed with a new, deeper note of a man weathered by hurt and hope mingled together. He relaxed against the couch, stretching his legs out toward the fire. The night unfurled around them. They traded stories about missed opportunities, almost promotions. Life's strange ache of watching your carefully laid plans change shape without your permission. Hours slipped by unnoticed. The clock chimed midnight. At some point. Evelyn made them both fresh mugs of herbal tea. Part 5. The shared space by the time the fire had dimmed to a bed of glowing embers. The world outside had quieted to a soft, steady drizzle. Evelyn stood slowly, her muscles protesting the long hours in the armchair. A dull, unfamiliar ache stirred deep in her chest. Not painful, but present. A weight she hadn't carried in a long time. It's late, she said, her voice lower. Let me get the guest room ready. Caleb sat up straighter, rubbing a hand over his face. Evelyn, truly, I can sleep on the couch. You are not sleeping on that couch. She interrupted immediately. I'm old enough to get back pain just from looking at that thing for too long. I'm not letting you ruin your spine out of politeness. He smiled, defeated in the best way. Okay? Guest room it is. Then, in the small, sun-drenched room at the end of the hall, she smoothed fresh sheets over the mattress, fluffed a pillow that was slightly lumpier than she remembered, and set a clean glass of water on the nightstand. The motions were simple. But something about them tugged at a part of her that had been dormant since the divorce. She had done this countless times before for Caleb as a teenager, for Clara when she needed a break, and for her own ex-husband Arthur once upon a time, when being kind had still felt effortless as she stepped back to look at the room. lamplight pulling shadows into the corners, she heard footsteps behind her. Caleb leaned against the doorframe, watching her. The towel now neatly folded over one arm. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble," he said quietly. "It took me 5 minutes and a pillow fight with the bedding," she replied, feigning exasperation. "I've survived much worse." He smiled, but his voice was tender when he spoke again. "Thank you. Really? For opening the door. For everything tonight. I truly don't know what I would have done if you'd said no." She met his gaze and saw nothing but tired, unadorned honesty there. "I would never have said no, Caleb. You know that." For a moment, neither of them moved. She saw him not as the boy with scraped knees and awkward jokes, but as a man standing at the unsteady edge of a new chapter, looking to her not for rescue, but for a solid, quiet place to breathe. "Get some sleep, Caleb," she said softly. "You are safe here. The rest can wait until morning." He nodded. "Good night." She lay awake for a long time listening. At some point, she heard a faint creak from the guest room as he shifted in bed. The small noise brought an unexpected smile to her lips. For years, she had told herself that solitude was peace. That quiet meant she was finally safe from the chaos of other people's needs. But as the rain whispered against the windows and sleep finally tugged at her, another thought rose gently within her. Perhaps I had mistaken absence for peace. Perhaps this was what change felt like, subtle at first, like a door opening in a house that had been sealed shut for far too long. Part 6. The quiet mending days slipped into a new rhythm. Morning light filtered through the curtains differently with someone else in the house. Evelyn woke to the soft murmur of running water in the bathroom, the quiet clink of a mug set on the kitchen counter, the faint low hum of music from a phone speaker. The Gables, which had felt like a museum exhibita, its preserved life suddenly lived again. Caleb settled into the guest room as if it had been waiting for him. He unpacked his small bag, stacked a few design sketchbooks on the desk by the window. He offered to help with anything that needed fixing. And true to his word, he noticed every small thing that had been quietly deteriorating. The edge of a cabinet that never quite closed right. The faucet that dripped just enough to be irritating. The old mail post leaning at an awkward, drunken angle. He moved through the house with a kind of gentle focus. Tools in hand, tightening screws, adjusting hinges. Cleaning paint-chipped surfaces with patient hands. "You don't have to do all this," Evelyn said one afternoon, as he stood on the front porch, repainting the railing in slow, careful strokes. "I know," he replied, not looking away from his work. "But it feels good to fix something that actually stays fixed for a while." She watched him from the doorway, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. The late morning sun lit the side of his face, softening his features. There was a quietness in him, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was the kind of silence that came after you had cried everything you could, and were now simply breathing through the echo. He hummed under his breath some songs she didn't know, and for the first time in a long while, Evelyn felt the quiet warmth of shared space. No pressure to talk, no expectation to entertain. Just two lives comfortably overlapping. In return, she did what she knew best. She cooked. Not out of obligation, but out of some old deep instinct that woke up as soon as she heard an extra chair scraped back from the table. She made roasted vegetables and simple, hearty pastas. The kind of meals that wrap themselves around you from the inside out. One weekend, she dug out an old handwritten recipe for the cranberry and spice cake he had loved as a child. As the spices warmed in the oven, filling the kitchen with a buttery sweetness that made the air feel thick and nostalgic, Caleb wandered in, drawn by the smell. "Is that?" He stopped in the doorway, eyes widening slightly. "No way. You still remember how to make that?" "I've been known to retain useful information," she said, trying to look serious. "Like people's dessert weaknesses." "You really remember everything, don't you?" he said, shaking his head with a small, incredulous laugh. "Not everything," she replied. "Just the important things. Like the time you tried to microwave a handful of metal paper clips." "That was an experiment," he protested. "Science. The kitchen ceiling still bears witness to your science." she retorted. They ate the cake warm, forkfuls cutting through the flaky crust as they sat at the table. He closed his eyes at the first bite. "I'm not exaggerating when I say this might be the best thing that's happened to me in months," said. "That's deeply depressing," Evelyn replied. "But I'll take the compliment." Kay fell into easy routines. He swept the porch and carried groceries without being asked. She left an extra mug by the coffee maker in the mornings. They watched old black and white movies, trading commentary about bad haircuts and questionable dialogue. Yet beneath the simplicity ran a quieter current. A growing, unspoken understanding. A shared sense of having found something they hadn't known they were missing. Part 7. The clarity of the dark one evening. A storm rolled in with the kind of sudden intensity that turned the sky dark before dinner. Wind rattled the branches outside, and rain came in hard sheets against the windows. Just after they'd finished eating, the lights flickered once, twice, then surrendered completely. The house plunged into darkness. "Whoa," Caleb said, the sound of his chair scraping back following his surprised exhale. "Stay put." Evelyn called from the drawer where she kept the matches. "I've done this dance before." Within minutes, she had candles glowing on the coffee table, the kitchen counter, and the fireplace mantel. Their small, stubborn flames stamped halos of light into the dark, turning the living room into a cave of soft, defiant gold. The storm outside raged, but in the middle of it all, the pockets of candlelight felt steady. Caleb sat on the couch, watching the flames. "I forgot how quiet everything gets without electricity," he said. "You can hear your own thoughts too much. That's why we invited the candles," Evelyn replied, settling into her armchair. "They'll distract the thoughts." He smiled, the gentle glow picking out the curve of his mouth, the faint lines of strain near his eyes. "This place." He paused, searching for the right words. "I don't know. It feels like some kind of safe zone. Like time slows down when I'm here." Her heart skipped in that small, startled way it did when something simple landed deeper than expected. "It's just an old house," she said, though her voice softened involuntarily. He shook his head. "No, it's not. It's you, Evelyn. You always made spaces feel calmer, even when everything outside was falling apart." Memories stirred. Nights spent sitting with Clara at Evelyn's first tiny apartment after the divorce. Caleb curled up on the couch between them while the adults whispered about bills and illnesses and stubborn former husbands. She had made tea then, too. It was strange to realize she had spent much of her life trying to build these small pockets of gentleness in the middle of chaos. "I just made sure there were snacks," she replied, trying to lighten the heavy moment. He gave her a knowing look. "You showed up when you didn't have to," he said. "When Mom was in and out of the hospital after her surgery, you slept on our couch for 3 days. You didn't even complain when I hogged the TV." "You were 12, she pointed out. "And terrible at sharing. Still am," he said. "But you never made me feel like I was in the way." That kind of thing sticks with you. The quiet between them thickened, not with discomfort, but with profound meaning. "How are you really doing?" she asked after a stretch of silence. "Not just fine, not getting there, the honest version." "I feel like someone took my life and shook it like a snow globe," he said, eventually. "And now everything's still drifting down, and I can't see what it will look like when it lands." He rubbed the back of his neck, his fingers pressing into the tense muscle there. "Sometimes I think I'm okay. I make coffee. I send out job applications. I fix a cabinet. And then it'll hit me out of nowhere how much I lost at once the apartment. The future I thought I was building. The person I thought I was with. I don't know what to do with that feeling." "You don't have to know what to do with it," she said. "Not yet. Sometimes all you can do is sit in the middle of the mess and remember you're not the mess itself. You say that like it's easy." "Oh, it's not easy at all," she replied. "If it were, no one would need tea or therapy or late-night calls. Or showing up at your former almost dance house." He smiled. "Is that my official title now?" "Someone who has seen you wear socks with sandals and has never been allowed to forget it," she suggested. They laughed, and the sound braided itself through the soft crackle of the candles and the distant rumble of the thunder. For a moment, the heavy weight in the room thinned. giving way to something lighter and more truthful. Part 8. The New View That Night. After he retreated to the guest room, Evelyn found sleep elusive. She reminded herself firmly that this comfort was only nostalgia. A kind of emotional muscle memory waking up after being unused for too long. This is gratitude, Evelyn, her mind commanded. Familiar affection. Nothing more but her heart, stubborn and human, did not always obey the logic her mind laid out so neatly. In the days that followed, their connection deepened in ways that surprised them both. They ran errands together, arguing over which brand of oats was superior. On quiet afternoons, Evelyn worked in her small herb garden while Caleb sanded and repainted the patio chairs. Both would pause now and then to share small observations about the rain, the birds, or the neighbors. One afternoon, she caught him standing in the back doorway, watching her as she knelt among the herbs, dirt smudged on her fingers. There was a softness in his expression she didn't quite know how to manage. She wiped her hands on her jeans and brushed her hair back from her face in a self-conscious gesture. "Don't judge me," she said. "This rosemary has seen better days." He shook his head, pushing off the doorframe. "I wasn't judging. I was just thinking you look happier out there," he said. He walked closer, his voice dropping to a low, thoughtful murmur. "I don't remember seeing you look like this much when I was a kid." And in that simple, honest observation, in that quiet acknowledgement of a life she had been afraid to live for herself, Evelyn realized the full extent of the change.